That you see displayed around us were produced as publicity images to promote the work of the sitter or to enhance the sitter's public persona. The way in which this room is presented, as you see, there are a lot of paintings. It's very densely populated, one above the other. There's a lot going on, and this is called salon style hang, the style that we use to represent here the paintings. Of Mai, who was the first Polynesian man to ever visit Britain, and also is the country's first portrayal of a non-white subject in the style of a grand society portrait. As a matter of interest, you see this painting here, and then you see the painting here of John Stewart, politician John Stewart. They're exactly the same style. So this is also painted by Joshua Reynolds. It's interesting to see that it's actually the same style, but it's different clothes and background and everything. So you can see Joshua Reynolds was a master of portraits. Reynolds depicts Mai here as a handsome prince-like figure, elegantly dressed in white robes, 118 eventful years. In this room you can meet these kings and queens and other associated figures, including some of Henry VIII's 6 wives, for example. The Tudor period was one of huge social and cultural change. Figures such as William Shakespeare, Edmund Spenser, and Cardinal Wolsey emerged. I imagine that most of you will know about William Shakespeare as one of the greatest writers of all time. He was a playwright, poet, and also a sort of active commentator during the era of Elizabeth I. His most famous plays, as you know, Macbeth, Hamlet, Romeo and Juliet. He wrote 38 plays, 154 sonnets. I'm not going to list everything that he did, but you know, very productive, very important for the history of literature. Many of you may also recognize this as his image. However, while this is the most famous image of Shakespeare and possibly the most widely reproduced, there's a bit of intrigue and mystery behind this portrait, and we will see why I say so. This was gifted to the National Portrait Gallery by Francis Egerton in 1856, and this portrait is also known as the Chandos portrait because it used to belong to the Dukes of Chandos. Now, this was the very first portrait acquired by the gallery. So if you look all around the gallery, all our work on display and also our works not on display that you see online, they all have a unique reference number. So they all have an MPG number. So MPG, National Portrait Gallery, they all have different numbers. This is MPG 1. So this is very important for the gallery, for us, because this is number 1. It was the very first portrait that we ever acquired. You can see that the portrait itself is not actually in very good condition. It's very dark as a result of being over varnished at least once during a number of restorations throughout the centuries. The earring stands out, as you see, and so does the white collar, because they were painted with a pigment containing lead. That's why they stand out. X-ray imaging has also revealed holes in the canvas, which have been repaired, and there is clear evidence of over-enthusiastic restoration, because analysis of the paint shows that Shakespeare's hair and beard was actually enlarged at some point. So it didn't actually look like that initially, but someone restoring it was very zealous, and he went the extra mile somewhere. So it's interesting to know that as well. When the portrait was gifted, Shakespeare's appearance had been a matter of national interest for around 2 centuries, because as I mentioned before, people didn't know how people looked like. So they might know about Shakespeare and the theatre plays and all of that, but they actually might wonder, how does he actually look like? So this portrait was identified in the mid-17th century as a portrait of Shakespeare, and this is the only portrait of Shakespeare that has a good claim to have been painted from life, actually. Although the identity remains highly probable, the sitter's authenticity cannot be proven completely. However, there are some features that suggest us that this is William Shakespeare, and I can list them for you. Number 1, it bears a strong resemblance to Shakespeare's memorial bust and to an engraved likeness included in his published works in 1623. So basically, it looks like William Shakespeare. The simple costume of a black doublet and falling collar was of the time similar to those seen in the portraits of Ben Jonson, who was Shakespeare's contemporary. In fact, if you go behind this wall, we have a portrait of Ben Jonson, and he's actually wearing the same thing. So you can see that was at the time. Portrait of Dame Christabel Pankhurst. This young woman is called Dame Christabel Pankhurst. This was painted in 1909 by Ethel Wright, who was a portraitist who supported the suffrage cause, and was gifted to us in 2011. We have to give a bit of historic background here, what's going on. In 1909, by the fight for women's suffrage, who was the right to vote in parliamentary general elections for women, was in full swing in the United Kingdom. The cause had become a national movement for the first time even before that in the Victorian era, with the formation of the National Union of Women's Suffrage Societies, who campaigned peacefully and constitutionally for the right to vote for women. However, by 1903, many had become very frustrated with a perceived lack of progress of the movement and believed that new tactics were actually required. So under the slogan of deeds not words, they probably heard before, Christabel, as you see here, along with her mother Emmeline and sisters Sylvia and Adela, founded a new group, the Women's Social and Political Union, or WSPU, that adopted a new militant approach based on civil disobedience and direct action. So what did they do? Well, the group members heckled politicians, they held demonstrations and marches, they broke the law to force arrests, they broke windows in prominent buildings, they committed a series of arson attacks, and even paid visits here at the National Portrait Gallery and to our neighbors, the National Gallery, in order to slash some artworks. And all of this is a portrait of the three Bronte sisters, famous novelists of the 19th century. Charlotte Bronte's Jane Eyre was the first to have major success. Then we had Emily's Bronte Wuthering Heights, and then Anne's The Tenants of Wildfell Hall, that were later accepted as masterpieces of literature. We have Anne here, Emily, and then you have Charlotte on the right, and this is the only surviving portrait of all three sisters. This portrait was painted in about 1834 by the Bronte's brother, called Patrick Branwell Bronte, when he was just 17 years old at the time. In the center of the group, you see here, there is a male figure previously concealed by a painted pillar. It can just be made out, and it's almost certainly a self-portrait of Branwell Bronte himself. Now, we don't know why he decided to paint himself in and then out. Perhaps he thought that he didn't need to be in the picture, or maybe he thought that he didn't do a very good job. We don't know. What we know is that he tried to forge a career as a painter. At the time, he was never quite successful. He led a bit of a troubled life, and he died young. He died at the age of 31. However, the pillar gives a painting a sort of work in progress, imperfect look that captures quite nicely what it might have been like for a brother to paint his own sisters, if you think about it. For example, a tapestry. A donation from the artist Michael Armitage at the Whitefield Gallery. Tapestry based on a painting which the artist produced in 2020 as a commission for the South Bank and Haywards Gallery Everyday Heroes project. Now, this is important, I'll tell you so you know what we're talking about here. This project celebrated key workers from the COVID-19 pandemic. So we're talking about COVID-19. Just a bit about the artist. Michael is a Kenyan-born contemporary artist, dual Kenyan-English heritage, working between London and Nairobi. The tapestry was produced in 20 talk. My name is Stefano. I'm one of the visitor experience assistants in the gallery, and I'm together with my colleague, the volunteer Yates. We're gonna assist you today in this talk. Portrait of the Day is part of the free tours that we give in the gallery. The highlights tour, we have 11 o'clock and 3 o'clock. the portrait of the day is about half an hour of one portrait only that we select. And so we're going to talk about one specific portrait, and every day changes, so keep an eye on the website for the portrait of the day. Now, I selected a specific painting for my talk today, and this is the painting I've selected. Barbara Villiers, and then subsequently called Barbara Palmer when she got married, with her son, Charles. So this is the painting I've selected, and I selected for various reasons, especially because I love the historic period that we're talking about in this room, room 6. So we spent this very first night with Barbara at the Palace of Whitehall, the very first night. From this point on, Barbara Villiers was seen with King Charles at formal and public events, and was quickly acknowledged as his mistress. After the birth of their daughter Anne Palmer, Villiers' first child with the king, Roger Palmer, the husband, was created Baron of Limerick and Earl of Castlemaine in December 1661 as consolation, we can say. And although he acknowledged the child as his own, Roger Palmer knew that his marriage was one in name only, and he retreated from court to concentrate on his career as a member of parliament, really. Be more quiet. And yeah. But life at the Restoration Court